Welcome everyone to ShinKyu University. I am really excited to bring you an interview that I've been trying to get for a very long time, and that's with my very much esteemed colleague and mentor on so many levels, Stephen Brown. Stephen has been an absolute inspiration to me simply because his path is somewhat similar to my own, and just to see how much you can actually bring Japanese acupuncture to the West. And I'm really excited to give all of you on this channel a little bit of insight into his origin story. So without further ado, I'm going to interview today Stephen Brown and all about his lifelong journey with Japanese acupuncture and moxibustion. If you haven't already, I would love for you to like, subscribe, and hit the little bell to be notified about all the things concerning Japanese acupuncture and moxibustion and so much more, including really interesting interviews like this one today. So stick with us. It's going to be a great conversation. So with that, Stephen, I would love for you to tell me a little bit about how you got into Japanese medicine, because I'm pretty sure that you started your studies when you were in Japan. Is that correct?
I did, but it started sooner than that. I was in Japan as a young man. Actually, I was raised there and I spoke the language already, but I moved there, say, in junior high, 14 years old. I moved to the States. And then I did one last year of high school I graduated in 1972. So I did my senior year in Japan because my dad was still there. And then I was in the States until 1976. And while I was in the States, I realized, I wanted to do something related to Japan and health. And so I came upon shiatsu. So I went back to Japan and I started a journey of, figuring out how to make a living there. And I did some interpreting work and translation work. And English teaching is the major job market for foreigners, gaijin, but I didn't do very much of that at all. I went straight into translation, which is great because when I entered acupuncture school in 1980, I could work part-time as a translator, and then I could, do my night classes. It's like 3 hours a night, 5 days a week. They had a night course. And Japanese acupuncture school is not very good, especially clinically. They don't give you very many skills, but it's more like paper exam nowadays anyway. I knew full well going into Japanese acupuncture school that it wouldn't give me the tools I needed to really become a good practitioner. I'd interviewed several people, foreigners as well as others, Japanese, and they were disappointed with the schools, and so I knew what I was getting into. But I was all the way in, and I had some good colleagues, and we studied together. Even we invited other teachers to come to our Benkyokai, our study group, and we studied twice as much as the other students because passing the exam is that's just one level. The next level is passing muster for healing patients. So,
and what school did you go to? I find it really interesting that you felt that it wasn't a really good education, because the education I got at Toyo ShinKyu was really, I was really satisfied with my education.
Well, yes, you were at an exceptional school with a lot of tradition. And in fact, I myself went to Toyo ShinKyu to be with Ito Shingu sensei, who was another colleague had told me about. And I even without the permission, I went and sat in on his class, and he looked the other way. That's a very good memory. So yeah, Toyo ShinKyu, where you were, was an exceptional school. It's like going to SIOM, which is the Seattle Institute of East Asian Medicine. A small school that's really dedicated to palpation is going to be totally different than going to a big, one of these corporate schools that are just trying to churn out and unfortunately, most Japanese schools now are corporate schools that are churning out diplomas and licenses. That's their main thing. And it's true for the States as well as Japan. And you were very fortunate, and that's good. You were the exception that proved the rule, that education is by itself substandard for making people who are capable of, clinical work and beyond, making the medicine what it really can be in the
Yeah.
21st century. Because there's two things: medicine, what it used to be, and medicine, what it's becoming. And it
Mm,
has to keep evolving, you know?
mm,
And we have to find those teachers who have done the work to learn the medicine, and then who are growing, moving it forward.
mm, mm, mm.
And I'll speak more to that. But my journey with Japanese acupuncture uh, continued as I returned to the States in 1986. And then I started to teach here, and I started to practice here. And of course, I practiced shiatsu and acupuncture,
Mm.
and of course, moxa, okyu, because to me, herbs were interesting, but I was more interested in physical medicine. I was more interested in movement. I was more interested in channels and qi and qigong and putting stuff in the mouth. Even if it's an herb, I don't have anything against it. It's just not my kind of medicine,
Mhm,
in terms
mhm,
of what I want to practice. And Japanese acupuncture schools in Japan, herbs and acupuncture, moxa, are separate.
mhm.
The licensing is completely different, and that's what makes it so compelling for me, because that's an education for acupuncture and moxibustion as a standalone medicine, something that can take care of practically everything.
Mhm.
To have confidence that you don't have to lean on herbs. Not that it's not wrong. You could lean on other things too, but it's just that it's a complete system within itself. And I think when you do TCM, it comes across as you're missing something, and that's not true. You're not missing anything. Acupuncture, moxa alone can cure the 10,000 diseases.
So I'm
In
really
fact,
curious about that statement, and I apologize on cutting you off because do you believe, because I know before we started recording, you had mentioned that you had went and studied, I think you said you studied in China too, right? TCM.
yes.
Yeah. So do you believe TCM as a system on its own, as a style, so to speak, is also all encompassing? Do you think that, because TCM is kind of lacking in the moxibustion category as well, outside of stick moxa, but do you think that it's also all encompassing, or are there things that you think Japanese acupuncture and moxibustion are perhaps more efficient at taking care of, as opposed to just the TCM acupuncture?
Well, I'm not sure I agree with that framework, because to me, it's not where we start, but where we end up that matters.
Hmm.
So, having said that, I will say that TCM is potentially a complete system if it has herbs.
Hmm.
And that's what TCM is, and that's why people who do acupuncture only in the TCM context feel like they're missing one arm. But I think herbs are missing one arm. Herbs alone are missing one arm. Where's the chi? Well, the chi is in the taste, the chi is in the herbs. Well, what's the embodied experience of taking an herb? It's a whole different paradigm. So I would say that it's not Japanese styles or a TCM, which is the past, applied in a different cultural context in a different era.
Hmm.
TCM and Japanese styles. And how can we bring it forward into 21st century America and what's going on now? And I think definitely taking what's in TCM alone and trying to apply it directly. See, the problem with TCM is that it it claims to be a complete system that is transferable to any culture, any place in the world, and it's the real thing. But
Hmm.
it's, in fact, it's a formulation that's questionably applied in China.
Hmm.
And if it's applied in the same way over here, it's going to be a problem. And I think it's true for Japanese. The difference is in Japan, uh, most systems don't claim to be all encompassing or good for everything or everybody, because they don't have that kind of hegemony. It's sort of like the church. TCM has this kind of authority, and they claim that they represent, it's sort of like the Catholic Church claiming they represent Christ. No, they don't. They represent a patriarchy. and they're just have co-opted Christ or that brand to them. And this TCM isn't inherently wrong. I think what the problem is that what they claim to be is not what they really are. And that's the problem, because we're going to take whatever comes from Japanese, Korean, or Chinese, or even Indian medicine and upgrade it to what we need. The medicine has always been evolving, and we have to take the good stuff and get rid of the bad stuff. It's always the same process.
Yeah, well, I have so many questions just from that statement. I mean, the first off, I would say when you say it, you said originally TCM was questionably applied in China. I was wondering if you could expand on that thought a little bit, and then also I'd like to know
communism. It's like communism. It's the communists took over and they have imposed an economic, political, social system on China. Is it good or bad? Well, you know by the results. And TCM was imposed. TCM was forced. They did a very quick, in a short order of time, they took young practitioners and they reduced it to what was believable in the materialistic, Marxist paradigm that they had. So it was reduced quite a bit, but everyone does that. Everyone takes it and takes what they understand. And the real medicine to be really fleshed out has to be lived, and I don't think it was sufficiently vetted. Like the reason Japanese traditional acupuncture, for instance, they've been going at this for a long time. At least the people who read the classics have been trying to come up with the Japanese acupuncture. And the reason they can't agree is, one, dissension is allowed. People are allowed to have different views. And two, it's hard to reach a compromise or consensus, so they just keep going around and around. And you say, why is there so much diversity? Well, because there's no one authority that's saying this is the way it is. And that's what happened in China. And that's why I say it's questionable.
Got you. Well, I guess then, I'll put my second question aside because that brought up another question for me. And this is something that I've toyed with a lot over my time after coming out of Japan. Because as you know, Stephen, I learned there. And so my first introduction really to acupuncture was there. And in Japanese medicine, my biggest takeaway, and perhaps it's because of my school, was that really this statement of like mambyo ichija, so that there's many illnesses and there's one ja. All illnesses stem from ja, from this jaki or pernicious chi, shiechi. And one of the things that, I throughout so many styles, whatever teacher I go to, they're like, oh, there's jaki here, there's jaki there. They always pick up this word ja. But when I came back to the States, it was like this idea of pernicious element or shiechi was completely stripped out of the medicine. And even when I read through the Shanghanlun, the character for ja is there, but in the English translation, it just says pernicious element or an evil element. Do you have anything to say on how you mentioned materialism in China and how the medicine was applied to material things? Do you think that idea of ja and qi was kind of stripped out of the medicine on purpose? I guess qi wasn't, though, just this idea of jaki. What's your thought?
It's interesting. It's interesting because in modern times, the term qi has been left, but the real meaning of that has been stripped.
True.
And it's true also that in American education system, as we're trying to get integrated medicine and more, qi is just being downgraded or put aside in a corner as sort of like a decoration. And it's not really lived, it's not really experienced, and it's not really taught the patients as there's a core vitality within you, a flame that's burning within you that needs to be nurtured. If you have a fire, you know all about that. You're going to keep the fire going. You need to add fuel. You need to take away things that don't help the fire. But it's not taught that way. So yes, I think one is materialism, and the other was just lack of really experienced practitioners, because the difference between materialism and I don't want to call it spiritualism. I'll just say it's holistic. Holistic meaning you include things you don't even really understand, like qi. What the heck is that? What's jaki? That's a whole lifetime inquiry into what's the lived experience of that and how to dispel that, or how to go more towards normal chi. So it's an experiential kind of thing, which you can frame it with words, but it boils down to, and that's the whole thing for ShinKyu University too, is bringing the experience of these things we're talking about, and having people learn that rather than just throw concepts around and think you understand it.
Yeah.
So I really think
yeah.
the Seiki Jaki thing, it grows across the board, that so much has been taken from our medicine, because even if we got all the right information, already our view has been skewed irrevocably toward materialism and more left brain, goal-oriented kind of approach. What I mean by that is when you say all diseases have only one root cause, or one huge imbalance, or one kind of imbalance, that is looking at holism. That's a holistic view. And more the culture is looking for piecemeal solutions, like for X, Y, and Z, take this vitamin, for this, do that, for this, do that. And it's not looking at the flame as a whole and monitoring that state, just like I got a thing from my doctor. I got a physical exam just a week ago, and he says, "Oh, your hemoglobin and your platelets are low. I think I'm going to recheck your blood and have you checked by hematologist." They're not looking for signs of symptoms. Taking me against the statistically, I'm 2% or 3% lower than average. And that's out of 100 different things. And they don't look at the whole. I hope the doctor's looking at me a little more holistically than that, but he's looking at me as a whole conglomerate of symptoms and everything that has to drop in line, and then I should be healthy. But we know from my experience and from the work we do that you can have all your numbers in the right place and still feel horrible, and vice versa, of course. How could you even get old and feel vital like I do? Not all the time, mind you, but I get excited when I talk about this medicine, and there's more chi. How does that happen? I was with Shido Sensei, who's 91 years old, and he can't even stand straight. He's got a back that troubles him, so he has to sit when he treats. But he still treats 20 people a day, and he works 4 days a week.
Man.
And that's a phenomenal thing for a guy who's drank too much and worked too hard all his life. He's a workaholic. But how we can do that is he's keeping to the vitality that nurtures his core life by needling himself every day. I went there, I was able to give him a treatment. He gets treatment too. And giving treatment itself is a way he's moving his own chi.
Oh, I love that you just said that. How many practitioners, I think, could benefit from just that one statement just right now? Like, even, yes, getting treatment every day, giving yourself treatment every day, or getting treatment once a week, great. But like the fact that you can heal yourself through your treatment.
Right. And that's the part that's whole. See, it includes, and again, we're all biased toward reductionism. And it's just so, the default position in our minds is reductionism. Like if your child started coming screaming to you, you'd think, okay, how can I get that child to calm down? I mean, that's natural. But you wouldn't think, oh, how could we all be more harmonious with this screaming child as a family? It doesn't, our minds aren't designed for that. Our minds are designed to problem solve and troubleshoot and symptom manage.
I think I'm going to try that statement though. And my 3-year-old starts screaming at me next time.
Oh, no, but again,
it's just going to try it.
The reason is when you do that, and I do this for in my work too, there's more space because I get uptight because I know whether it's a screaming child or a patient who has pain I can't remove immediately. I feel like I'm in opposition to, and I feel part of me, it's just, I can part of me feels inadequate to the job, and part of me feels overconfident. But if I just open up and say, well, what could be the most harmonious outcome for me and this client and even their family going forward, it opens up space where I can be present in a way I wouldn't be if I was saying, well, I could really screw this up, or I could really get this right. It's not like a, and it's how you frame it that really determines how your medicine comes out. And I think we're being forced to prematurely into a more reductionistic viewpoint when this comes from holistic life medicine versus more mechanistic, reductionistic, piecemeal medicine.
I just got so excited again. I'm sorry. So again, another thing that I think someone, especially in perhaps their first 10 years of practice, when most people end up dropping out of this medicine, because you and I both know, Stephen, that we have a pretty high attrition rate in this field. And I think really you hit the nail on the head there, in that when you come into clinic, so many practitioners, I talk to so many practitioners who come into ShinKyu because they're not confident with the skills that they got in school. I mean, talk about the inadequacies of education here in the States, especially, but around the world. Like, you're not taught technique, you're not really taught how to treat the patient. And then they see the patient and they're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to treat them. You know, I'm not sure how to bring the theory and to enact it, you know, and it's, as you said, they're just trying to, you know, me versus this patient's symptoms, right? How can I help them? But instead of just doing that, being like, great, how can I welcome in this patient? How can I help them get a better outcome with me included? Just sounds so much more relaxing for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing that I think the majority of people who decide to stay with the medicine, because as you know too, if you stay in, you commit. It's like a marriage in a way. You commit to a lot more than you thought you had to do originally.
Yes.
It wasn't as easy. So basically, you're deciding for a lifetime of basically study and training. There's no stopping. And if you just think, well, I can learn so much and I can learn a certain protocol and I can just keep doing the same thing pretty much, tweak it here and there, but mostly do that. No, you're going to have to change. You're going to have to grow as a practitioner, as a human being, intentionally, not by happenstance. You have to commit to learning and commit to practice. I'm not just talking about treating people, but treating yourself, treating your family, and in general, upping your game all the time. And that's work. And not everybody's up for it. Because it's like, oh no, I thought I could just learn to become, you know, some kind of a mechanic or some kind of a technician. And I'll do just like hairdressing or something. Although I wouldn't even think hairdressing would be a static thing. But, you know, it's not, it's much more dynamic. And there's so much more to our medicine. I mean, even just acumoxa is just so much there. And that's one reason I didn't go into herbs, is it was enough for me.
Yeah.
And I can't see why people can do justice to both. It's just almost like you'd have to be superhuman, not have a family, just be like a monk, you know, and just study and practice.
Well, I mean, that's why I say it all the time. Like, you can be a jack of all trades and a master of none, or you can be a master of one. And I think that's a very Japanese viewpoint on the medicine, if I may say, in that they, you know, my teachers told me, because the Yashinomichi, my style that I practice, does study herbs, but in order to help the acupuncture and moxibustion. And I asked my teachers, including the head, Yoko Takampa Sensei, I was like, well, should I start dispensing herbs in the States? Because here in Colorado, you don't have to have an herbal license. And he told me point blank, he's like, no, you should not start doing that, because as soon as you start dispensing herbs, your acupuncture and moxibustion is going to stop growing, because you're going to, as you said in the beginning, you'll start to rely on them. And he also said you can't master and be a master herbalist and be a master acupuncture and moxibustionist. You can't do both. They're different minds. And so I've really taken that to heart. And I still, to this day, don't practice herbs unless it's like a COVID patient and I can't go to their house or something like that, you know, and that's different. But I think that really flows very well into my second question, in that, you know, you said you had gone to China to study TCM. So usually I ask practitioners like yourself, how did Japanese acupuncture and moxibustion change your practice? But I guess a better question for you would be, how did TCM change your practice?
Right. That's a very good question. I graduated school and then I went to Toyohari for about 6 months. I did an internship with a Toyohari style guy for 6 months. And then I went to China in 1983. Yeah. And I was struck, and I was doing deeper needling by that time because I didn't really have a style, right out of school. But Toyohari is very, very shallow, and it's limited to that somewhat. They're afraid. They think that deeper needling is going to hurt people, and that's, it's not true. I mean, it'll hurt some people, and so I started doing deeper needling, and I could see the variety of styles, and I just saw beyond the TCM monolith, and I see how there were styles in China, quite different, in fact. TCM presents, see, that's the problem. People are distracted by what TCM presents itself to be, but if you really look at how it's being practiced, it's very, very different. And what that whole experience did for me is I realized, you know what? Japanese style, at least as the techniques are concerned, are much better for me and my clients, period. That the Chinese style of deeper needling as a default, just putting needles in as deep as they can handle it and leaving them in for 15 to half an hour, that's not good for most people, including myself. So I just came away with the idea that, well, they've created a system that works well in hospitals, and they lose a few and they win a few, but it's not really good individualized patient care, and it's certainly not holistic care. They were in the hospitals where we did actual hands-on practice, and we even got to treat Chinese patients. Wow. They were doing the same points over and over for weeks.
Really?
Yeah.
Like it didn't matter because I've heard this from other people who have gone to China and done their clinical observations and things like that. And they said the same thing, that usually there's a master practitioner, and he kind of tells his students, the students come and tell them what wrong with the patient, and they say, do these points, and they give them protocol points. And then they just do that on everybody who has those similar symptoms. Is it the same when you went?
Well, it depended on the clinic, but sometimes they're using point formulas, and other times they had decided on a point prescription, and they would just keep using the one over and over and over. So again, you can't, that's just the window that I looked into, so I can't judge it. China's a huge place. And then of course I have deep respect for their culture and their history. I no way want to intimate that I'm just saying this about my glimpse of TCM, and I'm not saying that about China. And I mean disrespect to people who are working hard in clinics. It's just that it was more rote, and there was a lot less feedback. To me, the key, the bottom line key with my style of Japanese medicine is the feedback loop. The main thing in acupuncture is feedback. You have a plan of action, you try it out and see how it's working, and you keep checking to see how your idea is playing out. Dr. Shido said simple theory and flexibility is better than complicated theory and inflexibility. And what I saw was a lot of inflexibility, or not a lot of adapting to the situation. Qi is constantly changing. That's the whole idea of Qi. It's a relational thing, and all these multiple factors. It's a dance. And I didn't see a lot of dancing going on. It was like ka-ching, ka-ching.
Yeah. Well, I think, and that's possibly because, as you said, and the people I've spoken with as well, it's in a hospital, and most of the time in the hospital, it has to be more technician kind of focused rather than clinician focused, and also perhaps more of an herbologist mind, where you do something for a set period of time and then you're supposed to see results. Perhaps that's why that system was in place,
Right, and that's exactly herbs. See, if you do herbs, and that's what happened with TCM, is they melded the theory and the practice of Chinese medicine into the same paradigm. It's a forced marriage. See, with herbs, of course, unless you live with a person, you can't monitor their pulse or their tongue or their symptoms on a daily basis. So you, of course, find out in a week when they come back, But acupuncture is not that way. between the time you gave them a treatment or you did one needle, the body, the chi has responded. And we as acupuncturists can find out before the patient says the symptom's better. They might say the symptom's still not good. We say, well, hang in there, get some rest after the treatment because you have some confidence. We have our own gauge. We don't need to ask the patient. We're not so symptom dependent. And I think that's a fundamental difference. It's a feedback loop of Japanese styles, the best of Japanese styles, even with trigger point acupuncture. There's a short feedback loop. And herbs, somehow they think, oh, I'll come back in a week and let me know. I don't know how you're doing. I just did something, but I have no idea what happened. So you're patient dependent. And that's not my medicine.
So I'm curious, you mentioned in your style. So I think we could probably say that you're doing Shudo style of Japanese meridian therapy. Is that correct? Or are you doing something different now?
I do that. That's sort of the top tier. And then I have shiatsu and I have sotai. Because for any musculoskeletal aches and pain, and this is important because in the Shudo style, there's not a lot of patient education. Oh, there's a few things, if you have back pain, you're not supposed to take a hot bath or whatever. But there's not a lot of, I do a lot of exercise education for my patients and how to move their body or how not to move their body. So I have a lot of physical movement, just like Jeffrey Dan. I'm much more to the balancing the body.
Hi, Kitty.
So,
well, and I think, when I talked with Jeffrey, which was the last interview I did on the channel, and I'll link that somewhere up here for you guys. But when I talked to Jeffrey, it's really apparent how Jeffrey's style has come about was through this strong influence of Seitai therapy, of, this of Sotai as well, but also Seitai, which is more of like a full body. I don't want to call it chiropractic care because it's not just chiropractic care, but something that also encompasses that into it. And I think it's just really interesting how much both Jeffrey Dan and you, and also Bob Quinn, for that matter, have all kind of gravitated towards this more manual part of the acupuncture and the moxibustion. Did you guys all find that separately, or at one point did you come together and realize that you have a commonality and then grow from there? Because I know all three of you work together quite closely.
Yes, it's the latter. We've come together, our interests have merged and we've been feeding off of each other and inspiring each other, because this is the evolution that I want to see in our medicine, that is acupuncture and moxibustion, as wedded to physical medicine or body work. Acupuncture, moxibustion didn't come from herbs. I'm not saying they always have to be separate, but still, having said that, it's not beholden to herbs. You can do herbs without acupuncture, and you can do acupuncture without herbs, and still get really good results. But in TCM, acupuncture has become subservient theoretically, and the techniques have just been left to languish. Many of them were lost. And there are people doing work, Jason Robertson notably, to reclaim some of that tradition. It's not totally gone. It's just that it's been so underplayed in hospital acupuncture, where you can't individualize care. You don't have time to feel the, check the pulse again or get the feedback.
Yeah. Well, I think I was teaching a class, what was a needle review class here at CSTCM, the local acupuncture school. And there was a student actually sitting into the class who was she had learned acupuncture in China. She had gotten her full doctorate, and then she was getting her license back in the States. And I had mentioned, some very classical oriented techniques that were very founded in, I think, in Japanese medicine, which is quick, shallow, and many for dispersion, and slow, deep, and few for a tonifying needle, which are very classically oriented. And, I was talking to her after class, and she was like, I've never actually seen someone do those techniques. And everybody else in class too, they're like, yeah, we had heard about it in the textbook, but we never actually seen it, because I think in TCM, it's almost always, correct me if I'm wrong, but you just kind of place the needle and you leave it alone, right?
Right. Yeah, that's a fundamental difference between traditional Japanese styles And because the scientific, the so-called modern acupuncturists might retain the needle quite a bit, but see the fundamental difference between, so there's this piece of wire that we've put into the body, so it's between the needle and the patient's body. But with the style of needling that I believe you do as well, it's between the three of us, and the needle actually has the smallest role. The technique matters, just like this Zoom connection has a certain link, and we're connected.
Mm-hmm.
But what you feel and say, and what I feel and say, is what runs the show, and this is a chi exchange. But they make it as if you can leave the patient for half an hour if you have the right point formula, and it's all done. And there's no, the chi is gone. The experience, the embodied experience of chi for the patient, as well as it's turned into the Dutchie, whereas the patient feels something, but what am I feeling on the other side of the needle? There's a handshake, right, of chi. Only one person. It so disempowers us.
Could you explain? I talk about that so much, about what you feel through the needle and connected to the needle, and how you communicate with the patient through the needle. But could you just expand a little bit on your thought on what you feel when you're connected with the patient, either, through the needle or through palpation or whatever you're doing?
Well, that's a whole big topic. I have a Zoom class that I offer on, I call it the SRT Club. And we talk about the arrival of chi, and we're still working on it because it's such a subtle thing in the beginning until you learn to recognize it. But it feels good. First of all, you feel relaxed and you feel connected. It's just like this conversation. I'm really enjoying this conversation. I have a really warm feeling. It's nice to see you. And it's about something that's close to both of our hearts. So we could go on for 2 hours, no problem.
Yeah.
It just feels like, we're connected. And what's different in acupuncture is once you're connected, then you can leave it alone. And it's like, okay, we can go off of Zoom now, and I can hold this warm feeling and go out and garden or go for a walk or do some work. It's mine and it's yours. So once you feel the arrival of chi and you're sure of it, then you're complete. So that's on a general level. But on a specific level, you get tingling, or you get pulsation, or you get a feeling of warmth. And a lot of times in your left hand, if your left hand is the, oshide, or the non-dominant hand. But it's subtle at first. And it's subtle because it can be felt in the whole body. It's yummy. Dr. Shudo says, I start to salivate. What is that? It's high, what do you call it? Parasympathetic.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've asked this question to my teachers of, when do you know you're done? When do you know when you place, I've had it asked to me as well from students, when do you know you're done? When you place the needle, when is your job now done? If I'm not leaving it there for 15 minutes, right? And every single time I've gotten the same answer. So I give my students the same answer, which is, when you, as you said, like once you've had that connection and you feel that arrival of chi, then you're done. Your job is finished. Then you move on. And I love that your answer was also the same, because I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to from so many different levels of education, and they all tell me the same thing. And it's nice when those things sync, it's really nice.
Yes. And that's what I love about all the work that I've done. And it's true for what I've studied in China and in Japan and Western sources. When entirely different people are, there's an intersection where it's like, they the same answer, that it's good for more than just that place or that time. Because truths decay, or truths become less applicable as time goes on. And that's why I keep saying, I don't feel this almost 70 years that I am, But in this stage of my life, I'm feeling like the medicine must go forward. And how will it go forward?
Mm.
And it needs to go forward as a new, better version of what it is. In other words, we have to take TCM, if that's what you're practicing, or Japanese styles, and make them fit our world, and take the best of what that is, and leave the things that aren't working. And the
Mm.
thing that doesn't work for me is this idea that you can leave a needle in and let the patient's body, your mind tells you, your left brain tells you this is the right point for this particular patient. And okay, I'll just put a needle in there and I'll leave them, and then I'll come back later and see what it does. No, the moment you touch the needle on the point, it's going to start to give you signals about whether that's right or wrong. And by the time you have the needle in, the body already knows. It's like food, we know right away, is this something yummy or not? But somehow with acupuncture, it's like, no, we don't know until they come back and tell us a week later. Like,
Yeah, right away. Well, I mean, I guess so. I know what my feedback loops are, but I'm curious what. And by the way, I'll put your class that you're doing in the description box below for everybody who's interested in it. The
I
SRT.
put it on the chat. So
Yeah, and then I'll paste that into the description box. So I'm really curious what you teach your students as far as the feedback loop that you were talking about, for them to reference back and see if their treatment was right for the patient, if they're still a little bit unsure about, I'm assuming what you're calling is hibiki, this like echo of energy, right? That arrival of chi. If you're still a little bit numb to it or you're unsure of it, how do you teach them to check their work?
For me, it's practicing on yourself, and trying to. Most of the people are not spending much time with the needle outside of the time they're in clinic. So the key is to do it more often, and then you notice differences more. But if you're not always with a needle, if you don't have a needle handy, I have a needle in every room. There's always a needle in reach, And if I get bored or I'm watching YouTube or something, I'm at least playing with the needle, if not actually putting it somewhere in my body. And it doesn't exist in my hand. When I'm with a patient, the needle doesn't exist. It's there. Of course it's there. It's like I'm talking to you now. I'm not looking at the computer and saying, oh, how's my Wi-Fi here? Is everything working? No, it's like you're driving a car. You're going somewhere with it. So I guess what people are looking for is, how can I feel more of these subtle things? And I think is to, and that's what we do, is we practice needling ourselves. It's SRT is the Shido's needling technique, but it's just trying to get everyone to practice on themselves and their family and their animals all the time, so that you feel when it's yummy, or you feel when it feels like a good connection, versus when, and this is why treating animals is really good, because they won't let you continue if it feels bad.
Nope. Nope. They will not.
So I don't really have any ways where you can say you're going to feel it if you do this, or you're going to feel it if you do this. It's sort of like a Zen koan in a way. You hang with it long enough, and then something starts to, in other words, you're going from your left brain into the right brain. People want a left brain answer for a right brain holistic response of your body. When something is yummy, your whole body relaxes and just goes into the yum state. It doesn't go, this part is nice, but not quite this part. Yeah. So my only answer would be practice every day in non-clinical settings, into where holding the needle or twirling the moxa is just, it's second nature, and you can just focus on feeling that connection each time. Yeah. What the real conversation is.
It's funny because a little bit behind your back, Stephen, I've talked to many people who've talked about how you're a big, tall white man, just encompassing a Japanese person's inside. But I think it's because you were raised there. And I think the statement that you said right now is really encompassing of that. Not to say that you are Japanese or anything like that. It's more so that I think the way that you view the medicine is very steeped in the cultural aspects of Japan. Because when I was in acupuncture school at Toyo ShinKyu, all the time I would ask, and just because of the person I am, I would ask everyone the same question because I was always curious about what different answers I could get. And if they, as you said, if there was a convergence, because if there's a convergence, that's where my brain would go, oh, that's the place I need to go. Because I'm naturally lazy and I want to go there laziest way possible. But one of the things I asked people while I was in school, I asked every single teacher, what's the best way, the best and quickest, most efficient way to become really good at this medicine? And all of them said exactly what you said, which is you need to needle yourself every single day. You need to hold the needle every single day. You need to do your moxa every single day until it's just another conductor. Because I've even asked Yoko Dakampa Sensei, I said, well, what's important about the needle? Like, why is a needle important? Why can't it be something else? And I still remember we were in a coffee shop and he picked up a toothpick and held it on a point in my arm. And I have to this day not been able to do as strong of a treatment as that one little toothpick did on my arm. And he was like, the needle means nothing. It's just an easier conductor. What's important is, as you were saying, that conversation that you're holding with the patient. And I just hope that like everyone who's listening to this takes all of your advice to heart, because like if you could just practice every single day, it just is such an amazing change for your practice. So thank you for saying
Yeah,
that.
and it's also an amazing change for your health, because
Yes.
do take your pulse and do take your pulse afterward. SRT is just, I won't teach you anything, but I will inspire you to practice on yourself. And the end result will be you'll be able to treat patients well into your 90s, like Shido Sensei, not because you have to or you need the money, but because it's so much fun and it gives you so much energy. I mean, this energy exchange is what life is all about. And yet it's become a technique that
Sorry, you cut out there. Could you say that again?
it's become a technique that's used only with patients who come to you.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, but it's Japanese. The best of what Japan has to offer is sometimes lost on the Japanese themselves, is this ability to take different techniques. In this case, we're talking about acupuncture, moxibustion, and get to the heart of it, you know? And the heart of acupuncture and moxibustion is the harmonizing and, the moving of energy and the harmonizing of energy on all levels, which is miraculous. And most Japanese don't get that much acupuncture. And most people here who get acupuncture don't have that experience. And so I really would say that when we start to practice every day, and you'll miss a day or two here, but basically all the time, you won't have to ask me, what is yummy or what is sweet feel like. It does.
Oh,
Under
sorry. Hold on, Stephen. Your sound is going in and out just a little bit. I apologize.
No, I should have had the mic in.
Sorry about that.
No.
Sorry. You were saying, so like when you practice every day on yourself. Sorry, if you could continue your thought, I apologize.
You will start to feel the differences in yourself, and you won't have to ask other people what does yummy or sweet feel like, because it's there. It's an undercurrent that's in all of life, but you amplify it, especially when you have two people. When you do it on yourself, it's even harder to feel, but when you have two people, the conversation is just yummier. It just, if you get to the heart of what you're most interested in, and then when you're off topic, I start to wander, or glaze over, it. But the Japanese have this wonderful way of taking, everything. They've done it with cars, they've done it with phones. They have a way of getting to the heart of something and making it better.
Yeah. And I'm not sure, like, do you have, I mean, it's completely off topic, but why do you think that the Japanese, in particular with medicine, were so skilled at being able to take this information from China, you know, and more than likely Korea as well, and be able to take it into Japan and make it so much more concentrated, I guess, is a way to put it. Perhaps not the best word, but
Well, it goes back to what you were saying, is where you look for confluences or correlations, you get to the heart of it. And they have a saying in Japan, sono kokoro wa, you know, what's the heart of it? And I think they do have a natural, because see, it's a very culturally diverse place. People think that Japan is one homogeneous thing, but that's a myth created in modern times since the Meiji Restoration. There were a diverse group of people, and if you're in Japan today, you'll see the diversity. Many different races from China or from the islands or from Siberia. They've learned to harmonize and live together, and find out what works for people. Yeah, they're really pragmatic in the end, and they're very oriented toward beauty and harmony, choa. You know, they're really, and that's where in America, I'm not sure about Europe because I haven't lived there, but in America, we love to look at differences and try to push ourselves, you know, compete basically, you know. And in Japan, competition is there definitely, but it doesn't overtake the desire to, in the end, make everybody happy. And this goes back to what I was saying about, you know, a screaming child or a screaming symptom. Is if we think we could just shut that thing up or calm it down, we're not really looking at harmony. It's a temporary thing. But if we thought, no, how can we be okay even with this? How can we all be holding this space together? That's more harmony, and that's holism versus let's get that one thing and make them to agree with us or kill them or whatever. It's not. The Japanese have a natural knack, I was going to say, for you know, creating art, because art is kind of like that. You know, it's the art of acupuncture, really.
well, and I mean, I think that brings us really neatly to my third question, because if we think of harmony, one of the questions that I'm consistently trying to ask myself is how can I help more practitioners to realize how great, well, not even realize, but to fulfill their potential in their practice through, you know, more pragmatic technique and palpation and understanding the patient in front of them, and what tools can I give them to help their practice be more whole for them, not necessarily but for me, but for them. And I'm really curious, you know, because usually what I ask practitioners is, you know, if someone wants to study Japanese acupuncture, moxibustion, or wants to continue their practice, what's your suggestions to them? And I think because you teach as well, you probably have a really unique take on that. So I'd love to hear what your suggestions are.
Find you know, beyond what I've already said, which is practice on you know, yourself and people around you outside of a clinical context. Find colleagues that you can share and swap ideas and experiences with, because you know it's not going to work. It doesn't work so well with, so you know, ShinKyu University or SRT Club, where you can talk to senior practitioners or even people on the same level and say, am I crazy? But I had this experience, you know, did you have that experience too? Because you can't talk that way to your animals or your children. And if you're talking to yourself, people will think you're weird. So definitely find colleagues, and they don't even have to be living close to you. Ideally, they would be, you know, at least one person close to you. I share with about 4 people right now. I mean, they're, you know, nobody around me has as much experience as I do, but it doesn't really matter because they're growing, you know, and they're growing fast. And I get the benefit of a treatment, and I get to give them one, you know, like I got a treatment today from a colleague here, and she's part of the SRT club, but I gave her one piece of advice. I mean, it wasn't even a big piece of advice. I made a comment. Oh, you did this, didn't you? She says, oh yeah, I did. That was it. You know, over off of a whole treatment. Nothing about the diagnosis of the points, but just I noticed that. Did you? Oh, okay, yeah, I did. And that kind of, not course correction, but you see yourself in a mirror that way. But you don't quite see yourself in a mirror if you're treating yourself or you're treating somebody without the patient context. So, and then of course, finding, inspiring books to read. Like I've translated Shiro's book of case histories. It doesn't really matter who the teacher is, but if it's someone who you see is evolving. One of my main reasons I love Shiro Sensei is he keeps growing. He's a moving target. I can never reach him. He's on to the next thing. And so find a teacher like that who inspires you to keep moving forward. And I think that the acupuncturists who are really dedicated acupuncturists will prove themselves to the public that, oh, you're really focused on acupuncture. You're herbs, all that's aside, you really focus on acupuncture, aren't you? ShinKyu Senmon, that's the idea. Whereas you're dabbling in all these other things, and you're a naturopath and you do acupuncture too. I see. You're a part-time acupuncturist, but you're a full-on acupuncturist. And then I think not everybody wants to sign on for that job, but if you do, practicing on yourself, finding colleagues that you can share inside information, experiences with, and then keep reading or connecting. This is one medium here, to people who inspire you. And it could be anybody. It doesn't even have to be Japanese. It could even be a painter or somebody who's growing in their art. And I don't think this idea that you just have to study all the time, it's kind of boring.
Well, but I think being able to find inspiration, even in something like art or music, and being able to take that and put it into your medicine is really important. And, if you mention like something like music, and I say music just because I used to play guitar, but when I listen to something like a really beautiful flamenco song, and I hear how the chorus is then connected back to the main verse, and how they had, either an abrupt change or a really smooth change, and how that made me feel. Honestly, those little things really affect how I treat, because I can go now to a person when I'm giving them a treatment and be like, oh, this person needs an abrupt change here. They need to have a change in tempo, or they need to have a smoother changeover. And you can get inspiration like that from so many different places. And again, really great advice, Stephen. It's just really, really great advice. I love talking to you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
me
Stephen.
too. Enjoyed this. So do it again.
Yeah. Well, I think for today, that'll end our conversation. I more than likely would love to talk to you again, because I just really enjoy it. But I would really, really recommend for everybody, again, I'm going to put the SRT Club in the description box below to make sure that you have a way to access Stephen and his teachings. Really, Stephen, you're just such a treasure to our whole community. And I'm so glad that people like you and Jeffrey are still there and putting forth your teachings, because you're helping the whole community evolve into whatever the next phase of life is for our community. And, I honestly don't know what that's going to be, because I'm a bit of a traditionalist, and I always think we should be going and studying the class, going back and studying what the people before us did. But I really appreciate and value that you're trying to take us a step further. So everyone who has time, please do check out Stephen's work. And thank you so much for coming on. It's just such a pleasure.
My pleasure. We'll see you again soon.
Yeah. All right, everyone.